Since ancient times, people have been wanting to keep track of time. And there's several things. Obviously, a day is a pretty easily defined sort of thing. 1 day, 2 day, 5 days, and so forth. But you don't want to just do days. You want to have a longer period. The some ancient cultures developed the idea of a week. The week that we use today is 7 days. That's a cycle. But another cycle that was used in the ancient world, even predating the week, was the month, a cycle of the moon's phases. And so a cycle of the moon's phases was quite a bit longer than just a week, and so it was a way of keeping track of longer periods of time. But then the question was, what about even longer periods than that? So to keep track of time over many days, then we use a calendar. And the word calendar actually comes from the Latin, the calends, the Roman day that accounts were due. So you owed someone money, you would pay on the calends. That was typically the first day of each month. So first day of each month, then you pay all your bills. And so the idea came there that we keep track of time that way. Well, a lunar calendar is one that just keeps track of the cycle of the moon's phases. And that is that you keep track of months according to the moon's phases. When you have a new moon, you start a new month. In fact, and this way of thinking about it, new moon would be not the astronomical new moon when it's lined up with the sun, but the first day after it's lined up that you see the moon, and then you start a new new month. Now, the problem is that a calendar that's a lunar calendar, purely you need to have, possibly a length of time that is longer than a month. Okay. And so that would be some year. Now, in many of the early calendars, then the month was defined. You start the month with the sighting of the moon after new moon. So now you start the month. Next time you see the moon, little crescent moon after new moon, you start the next month. And so you keep track of months that way. Well, what about a year? Well, a year was going to be a number of months, but often in the ancient world, that number was variable. So you would basically, a year would be so many months, but that so many kept changing. So sometimes a year was like 6 months, sometimes a year was 3 months, sometimes a year was like 20 months. So a year was basically when something big happened. So the year that the big flood happened. So the big flood, okay, big event, and then you just start counting months after that, and then all those months that came afterward were the year that the big flood happened, and then the king died. Okay, so the year that the king died. Okay, so the king dies, and then you start a new year, because some big event happened. Okay, and then you go now you have a new king, and so after a number of months, then the king has a son. So it's the year that Prince so-and-so was born. And so, and then you go for a number of months, and then the barbarians invade. So the year the barbarians invaded. And so if you live in really interesting times, then a calendar might, be such that a year was only 3 or 4 months. On the other hand, if you live in really boring times, then a year might be 20 or 30 months. And so this was not a particularly reliable way of keeping track of time. So you didn't really care. So they cared about the month, but the year was arbitrary. A solar calendar, on the other hand, tries to take that into account. A solar calendar keeps track of the sun. And so now you want the seasons to match up. So that means that the year would start, at a particular moment in time according to the sun. So the sun, when it is highest in the sky, lowest in the sky, so you'd start the year at the summer solstice or the equinox or something. Okay, and a combination of the two would be if you try to do both. You try to have the years and the months in sync. And so that turns out to be difficult because they don't really match. The problem here is that a lunar calendar based on sightings in the moon's phases, the lunar month averages about 29 and a half days. So some of them might be 29 days, some might be 30 days. But average is 29 and a half days, so 12 months is 354 days. 13 months is 383 and a half days. Neither of those really match the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, and so that gives rise to issues. The heliacal rising turns out to be how the ancients calculated the length of a year. The heliacal rising is when a star or a planet or a moon or whatever rises with the sun. So remember, everything rises about 4 minutes earlier every day. And so you'd have the sun rising, and then a few minutes later a star rises. You can't not see the stars because the sun's already up. And then the next day it rises 4 minutes earlier, then 4 minutes earlier, then 4 minutes earlier, until eventually you notice that star in twilight right before the sun rises. And so that's the heliacal rising. Many cultures kept track of the heliacal rising, or sometimes the heliacal setting, and used that to figure out when things were going to happen. For example, the Mesoamerican people, the Toltecs and the Aztecs kept track of the heliacal rising and setting of certain stars and star clusters, such as the Pleiades. And so from that, they could figure out when it was time to start planting and when it was time to start harvesting. Because that happened on an annual basis. So you notice when a particular star cluster or particular astronomical object is setting, with the sun or rising with the sun, that it's time to start planting crops or harvesting crops, and that repeat every year. And so that'd be a way of doing it. The heliacal rising for the Egyptians was the star Sirius, the brightest star in the sky other than the sun. And so the Egyptians noticed that Sirius would rise right before the sun rises, close to the same time every year that the Nile flooded. So that was a good way of keeping track of time. Because the months didn't work, because the months, the years were like arbitrary in length, and so you had to keep track of how many months. The months didn't match exactly with the seasons, so this was a good way of doing it. And so the sky priests would keep track of this, and they'd notice when it's getting close to time, they'd watch, and when they start seeing Sirius popping up in the morning skies right before the sun, they'd go tell the Pharaoh, that they have seen signs in the heavens that it's going to flood. And so he better send the harvesters out to harvest the crops. And so they'd harvest the crops, and you want to do that before the Nile floods, because when the Nile floods, the only part of Egypt that's really arable, you can grow food in, is right along the Nile. So if the Nile floods, then you wash away all the foods, and now you have a year of famine until you get to plant crops and harvest them again the following year. So they kind of made it like they were telling the future from the sky. This is where the idea of astrology got started. Now, really, Sirius rising with the sun did not make it flood. It was actually the weather conditions in the mountains further south, and those really didn't. I mean, they varied a little bit. So sometimes the Nile flooded early, and so the Pharaoh would just execute the sky priests and get new sky priests. We don't do that anymore because, it's not very nice, but that means there's less incentive for weather forecasters to be correct. Well, the sky priests kept doing this year after year after year, and they realized that on average, the heliacal rising of Sirius happened about every 365 days. And they worked a little bit further and realized, well, it's a little bit more than that. It's about 365 and a quarter days. And so they actually figured out, after watching this for a long time, that the actual time it takes Earth to go around the sun to within minutes. And they didn't realize that's what was happening, but they were figuring out how long it takes the seasons to repeat. And so they actually came up with a calendar that was based on the heliacal rising of Sirius. And the calendar went 365 days. And so it repeated for 4 years. After 4 years, rather than adding an extra day, because it wasn't exactly 365, what they did was they went 4 years, and then they just stopped, and they had a day that was not part of any year, and they partied all year, all day long, and it was basically a celebration of the Pharaoh. And then what they did was they would start the next cycle of 4 years. And after about 4 years, they would stick an extra day to celebrate the Pharaoh in. Okay. Now, it's not exactly 365 and 1/4, so they would be watching the heliacal rising. They'd insert it when needed, but it was roughly 365 and 1/4. Okay. So that gave rise to what we call the sidereal year, or the tropical year. The tropical year is how long it takes the seasons to repeat. That's from equinox to equinox, and that's slightly less than 365 and 1/4. That's 365 days, 5 hours, and almost 49 minutes. And the ancient Egyptian had this figured out, again, to within just a few minutes. The sidereal year is the actual orbital period of the Earth. That's 365 days, 6 hours, and a little over 9 minutes. So about 365.26 days. The tropical year, 365.24. That's how long the seasons take to repeat. Now, why is there a difference? Well, remember, Earth precesses on its axis. It changes the directions pointing, and so that means it changes exactly when the sun crosses the celestial equator. So the tropical year actually matches the seasons, and so the calendar year tries to match the year to the seasons, not the sky. The sky repeats slightly longer, 365 days, 6 hours, and 9 minutes. So this is a way of figuring out years. Okay.